In this episode, we sit down with Shamas Aziz, Director of Partnerships at Sentisum. Starting in customer service, Shamas climbed the ranks to lead in customer experience and strategic partnerships. He'll share his inspiring journey through industry changes in customer experience, especially post-COVID-19, and his rebound from multiple redundancies to establishing his career success. We'll also get his perspective on integrating AI and forming partnerships to enhance customer experience. Stay tuned to discover Shamas's key strategies for building impactful partnerships and creating seamless customer experiences in today's episode. Enjoy.
Hello, Sham. How are you doing? Welcome to.
It's good to be reunited.
I know, right? So we've known each other for quite a few years now, haven't we? And we were just talking off air, right? That we met exactly this same time last year in GITEX in Dubai, where we did a bit of a talk together, right? We did like a fireside chat. So really great to be meeting up with you again, Sham, to be talking a bit more.
Yeah, I remember that fondly. Actually, I was made redundant actually at Selfridges in the very same month last year. Jumped on the plane to UAE, did that fireside chat with you. I like to call it GTEX, but maybe it just sounds cooler when I say it. But let's call it GITEX then. We had a great chat. It was good seeing you again after all those years at Selfridges together. I'm glad to just be reunited. Literally 12 months to the last time we were together. But today it's the trio together with Jay. So yeah, good to see you again.
Excellent. Yeah, and thanks for coming on the show, Sham. So yeah, you spoke a bit about, you've gone through a bit of an interesting journey, right, over the last few years. I'm currently the Director of Partnerships, though, at Sentisum. I think that's how you say it, Sentisum. Yeah, so look, maybe, Sham, for the people listening, it'd be great to hear your career journey, because I know it's kind of transcended a few different areas, right? You've been in customer service, you've worked in customer experience, currently in partnerships. It'd be great to understand a bit more about how that's kind of come about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Most people that I know who sort of have been through a call center or the customer service arena at least usually end up in it accidentally. They somehow fall into it. And either they transition through onto somewhere else, or they end up staying and building a career out of it. I'm in that second group. I spent the last 22 years in the call center arena, customer service, customer care, customer support. It's had a few different names. In some cases also called customer experience. Although I find that now seems to lend itself more to the digital world. But I started on the phones in 2001. Working for a high street bank, taking calls. The days before there were smartphones and apps, and so I'd get a phone call and it'd literally be a bank balance. I'd be telling people over the phone. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working at an open plan call center, and then very quickly realized after taking a few thousand calls that there had to be more to this. Started progressing through the contact center into team leader roles, manager roles, eventually taking over my first contact center in 2005. That was the first contact center that I was in charge of as an ops manager. And so not just necessarily dealing with the day-to-day, but also making sure that the tools are right. I was giving the right insight and reports back into the business, that we had the right recruitment policy, the right P&L, the budget, the headcount, the planning. So it was the first time I was able to grow outside of just simply answering a call or leading a team to answer calls. And I spent a good 7 years there, a wonderful online grocer called Ocado, now a globally dominating business, and they've had a number of pivots, but I was there in the early days. And that's where I would say I cut my teeth. I joined there in 2005 with a fiance, and by the time I left in 2012, we were married and we had a kid. And so I grew up there both personally and professionally, and decided actually at that point it was time to make the next jump. I guess sometimes, and I don't know if you both feel this, when you've been somewhere for a very, very long time, 5 years plus, 7 years, 10 years, it becomes a little bit harder to reinvent yourself. Everything feels perhaps a little more incremental at that point. And I was looking for that next big jump rather than just the next incremental. So I left Ocado and ventured out into the e-com sort of world, which then sort of started to transition from customer care into customer experience. It was a little bit of both. And so I guess a couple of differences, at least my view, and I'd love your feedback on this. Customer experience to me, if I had to describe it to somebody versus, let's say, customer service, customer experience feels like a deliberate attempt of an outbound push message experience proposition that you want your customers to feel and receive. And then customer service feels a little bit more inbound to me, where the customer comes in this direction seeking help or otherwise. And so I try and sort of explain both, but almost as an umbrella term, you could say that customer experience is higher up. It's at the top because it's what you're pushing out, which drives that inbound customer service typically. So I don't know if I've gone off on a weird explanation, but I was trying to explain my transition from customer care to customer experience.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting take on that, Sham, right? The inbound versus the outbound, right? And yeah, I totally agree. I think to add to that as well, I think the one factor that I think is consistent across both, right, is the journey, right? Because there is a journey to kind of even make a call or speak with a person on the, if you've got an issue or any kind of problem, right? And it's the same obviously with customer experience as well, that there's a journey that you're kind of taking the customer along as well in terms of what you're trying to achieve, right? Whatever goal you're going after. So yeah, no, I think really interesting take on the two there. And yeah, Sham, I guess, you've kind of worked in a bit of both, right? When did you or was there a point in your career where you focused a bit more on customer experience versus customer service? What was the kind of turning point there?
Yeah, really, really good question. It was probably that time when I was at Ocado and I'd sort of discovered Excel at this point and pivot tables specifically. And so I was always running some sort of report, some sort of pie chart, some sort of table. And every week I was trying to figure out what kind of volume are we dealing with. And then inevitably that led me to, why are people getting in touch with us? And is it positive, negative, or neutral? And just by its very nature in the call center world, I would say a large percentage is negative. People are looking for help. They're at their wits' end at this point, most of them. And so the sentiment usually is negative. But I see that as an opportunity, right? Because they come through negative, and the goal for any call center and team is to make sure they leave positive. And so when I started seeing the same themes coming up week after week, and some of them I felt, at least to my non-business brain, that feels resolvable. That feels like something we could fix so that we could stop annoying customers. And actually, if we stop annoying them, then we get retention, and actually acquisition becomes a bit easier as well. And so that was that first sort of aha moment for me, where the data was staring me in the face, and every week I was seeing the same thing, and I was just thinking, I should tell somebody. And that's when I sort of discovered that whole customer experience angle, because there were a few teams in the business, like the marketing team, the sales team. They would always talk about customer experience. They would always talk about how we're being perceived as a brand, and are we delivering the right customer experience and the right journey. Even supply chain were talking about that as well, all the way from picking and packing an order inside a warehouse or distribution center through to delivering it and getting it into the customer's home. So I then realized quickly I had one thing that all of them didn't, and that was this data. I had this mine of information from customers who were just unfiltered giving it to me. And when I say unfiltered, I'm comparing that to a survey where a marketing team or an insights team might send out a survey with a specific goal in mind, with a set number of questions. The beauty of the call center is it's not driven by the brand, it's driven by the customer, what the customer wants to speak about. So that aha moment when I looked at the data and figured I should tell somebody this, I stumbled upon customer experience at that point, and I realized actually we didn't need to always just be reactive. And my thoughts were that if I could take this information and pump it back into the business and enact change, then eventually the contacts that come through would get better. And so it was my way of, in this sort of cycle, if you like, improving the experience by using the information I had. So I think that's when I sort of first discovered, through the power of data, that I could be more than just a reactive service department, but I could be an experience driving department.
Do you remember what that first case was? Like, you're going through those tables and you see a line item and you're just like, we can do something about it. And then, like, secondly, once you identify that, how did you know who to bring it to?
A good question. I remember it so well because it was a pivotal learning point for me. It was a WISMO, which in the call center industry stands for "Where is my order?" And in most e-com businesses, this will be in the top 5 contact reasons. Where is my order? Even now in 2024, I see it out in the industry, and it frustrates me because I think that was back in 2005, 2006. And I'm thinking, some almost 20 years later, customers are still trying to find out where their order is. And I just can't believe that in 2024, we don't have the tech or the solutions to fix that. And so I remember it well. How did I know where to go with it? I guess the resourcefulness of a startup, and at that time, Mercado was very early on, less than 5 years old, so everything was a startup. In a startup environment, if you don't do something, it doesn't get done. There isn't like another department that just swoops in and takes care of it. If you identify something, you typically need to either pick it up or find the right team and push it to them. And so when it was WISMO, that immediately made me think, okay, well, who's in charge of these orders going out and who manages that relationship with the carrier network? And it turned out in our business, we had 2 people that were in charge of that area. So I went straight to them and said, hey, can I show you this table? And they both just looked at me immediately and they were like, where'd you get that data from? And then I said, oh, call center. And they were like, how come the numbers are so high? And I was showing them how many thousands of contacts we deal with in a week. So for them, it was a whole nother world, right? They were based inside the warehouse. They were pick and pack orders, then they would load them onto vehicles and those vehicles would leave. And their KPIs were all around getting orders onto those vans and shipped. And so they weren't actually seeing this data until I sort of put it on the radar and put it on the table. And so, yeah, it was, I guess, through process of elimination of, I've got this data, who is somehow, some way connected to it. And if that person exists, I'm going to go and show them what I have.
You're able to like get that resolved. Like, did you ever find out, or was it one of those things where, you've uncovered something, you brought it to the attention of the necessary kind of stakeholders and lead to concerns, then it just gets lost in the ether and just left with your hands in your pockets, just wondering like, what now happened? Did the customer ever find their order?
Yeah, I definitely ended up becoming a meme in that one, with my hands in my pockets, staring down at the ground. But yeah, I was able to, I guess, highlight it to the right people, and they did take some easy steps to try and improve the journey. But with most businesses, I think, that are in that growth phase, if you have a limited pot of money, you most likely will throw it after acquisition and further growth. And you're probably a little less likely to spend it on fixes. And I think that's just a prioritization thing. I don't think it's right or wrong. Different businesses will have a different balance. I was able to enact some change on some of the easier stuff. But back then, also, it was very early days. So if you imagine today in the carrier network, you could see your delivery driver on an app on your phone in real time where they are with some businesses. Back then, this technology didn't exist. And so, I was before my time a little bit in trying to say to people, like, let's fix this. And the question that would come back would be how? We packed the order as fast as we could. We sent the vehicle out, but we can't predict traffic. It now turns out in 2024 that a lot of brands actually have live traffic data, live GPS data. They can see where the van is. They can see if it's going to be late. They can allow the customer in-flight options. I guess the reality is, though, WISMO's still today in the top 5 contact reasons. So, no, I did not fix the problem.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Sham. And yeah, I love the touch there on like how the technology has also helped to enhance that experience over time. Look, I know this was like your first kind of venture, right? And that's how you kind of discovered that customer experience. But I'm assuming that after that, you then started to look at additional things, right? And started to pick up some more kind of projects or things like that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think customer experience put me in the room with a couple of different people. And I think the one thing that was consistent in every room that I went into, I always had the most data. As coming from a call center environment, I had thousands, if not millions, of customer conversations, and I had that information ready to go. And there's nothing like a great pivot table or a really good customer story to get the attention of a room, and especially in an exec boardroom or in a PMO project management office if you're trying to enact change. So I think further in my career, once I jumped into this sort of customer experience realm, all the roles that I started taking on were then at a head of level. And I guess the difference there, the extra sort of, string to that bow, was that we would also do tactical and strategic changes. So, for example, if I still have a Wismo issue, I now know with my new knowledge and my sort of strategic pull that I can go into a boardroom or I can speak to the equivalent head of in the carrier network using that data, and I can help them find either the right partner and or develop the capability with them so that we can solve that problem longer term. And so this then started to put me in touch with wider customer experience initiatives, especially if we use the word customer journey. So that end-to-end customer journey, I could then play a part in that, and I didn't have to stay in my lane. I didn't have to stay in the call center anymore. I could go speak to supply chain. If a stock inquiry was a big question, I could go and speak to the warehouse. If it was around marketing campaigns, I could go to the marketing team. So I'd always turn up with my data. I'd always turn up with a customer story. And then I would use that to do cross-functional projects. And some of the biggest businesses in the world work in this sort of cross-functional matrix way. So taking Selfridge is somewhere where both you and I worked, we would often find ourselves in a room with lots of different stakeholders. All of us had the same goal though, and that was, how do you improve the customer experience journey? And so this then exposed me to more parts of the business, which helped me from a commercial perspective to understand how things get prioritized, why and how do you focus on acquisition and or retention. Loyalty is quite big at the moment. Lots of people are talking about that. And so the beauty of customer service, customer care is you're going to get almost every kind of query coming through that department. And so through it, I was able to broaden out my skill set. I often joke about it, and in the call center industry, we say that if you've ever worked in a call center before, it's like doing a mini MBA, because you will end up through your time dealing with every kind of customer, every kind of use case, and you'll end up dealing with all the internal departments one by one because there'll be a query for them. So it's a lot cheaper than an MBA, I'd say, joining a call center.
How did you know that getting out of your swim lane was key to kind of being successful in your role? Right? Because like you said that you made a leap from being kind of on the ground to assuming more kind of head of positions. Now, one might assume that someone taking that leap might be like, I was a great individual contributor, great person on the team. That's why I'm where I am now. And they might get into that head off position and just continue doing what they were doing because that's what they associate with success. But it sounds like to me that maybe there was or there wasn't, but it seems like there could have been a kind of conscious decision to kind of cross over lanes and kind of get out of that comfort zone, so to speak, to kind of become successful in your role. But how did you know that you needed to do that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I've thought about this enough over the years for different reasons, but I always wanted to know more about whatever it is that I was working on. And through these various cross-functional projects, or if I attended an industry event, or with any new startup that would come onto the scene, like I remember the birth of things like Facebook, Twitter, and all these kind of global behemoths. I remember when they were inception and minimum viable product, So when I saw all these things just cropping up, popping up, I found it interesting. I would read about them, usually through online things like Business Insider and a couple of other online places, YouTube as well, and just sort of seeing all these interesting businesses come along, I always had an interest in it. My father used to have his own grocery store, so he'd always come home. And in those days, it was very much, notes and coins and counting them up and tallying up at the end of the day. And so I'd seen what being a business owner was like at home from a young age, to then being a cog inside a business, to then thinking, actually, I could probably do more here because I've got something valuable. And I keep going on about that data and that customer story. But I realized quite early on that actually almost everybody's interested in the customer experience journey. Not all of them could do something about it. And I'd stumbled on it by mistake, right? I told you I didn't deliberately choose a call center career. I ended up joining a call center in the town that I lived in. And it was actually one of the biggest employers in the town. So almost every household at some point had gone through this call center. But when I'd sort of realized the power of the information that I had at hand, together with seeing actually the output and the results that it can generate, improve customer experience, better retention, loyalty, all those great things, and business growth, I don't know, it kept feeding me that knowledge and then that next success. And don't get me wrong, not all the projects were successful, right? But we'll talk about that too. That just sort of then made me think, oh, what's the next one and the next one and the next one? And so for me, it was like a live education. After college, didn't go to university. I didn't do a degree. I didn't do that route. I went to work quite early. And so my education was on the job. And every time I gained a new role, achieved a new level, did a new project, my knowledge kept growing. And that first is still here today in this new realm of partnerships that I've ended up.
Amazing. Really interesting journey, Sham. And before I kind of touch on the partnerships piece, I wanted to quickly ask you, because something you said there earlier just kind of, jigged my memory a little bit as well, in the sense that, I think customer experience, it's a really strange area, right? Because I feel like it's done a bit of a 360. I feel like back in the day, it was well known, or it was kind of seen in a certain light. And it's really coming back around again now. Like now there's a lot of talk about customer experience. But why do you think, Sham, that, because you said earlier, right, that people have different definitions of it, or people kind of think about it in different ways, right? Why do you think that is though, Sham? Like, where do you think that people are getting confused with what good customer experience actually means?
Yeah, I don't know. There's still, even up until this summer, I did a boat party and I invited a lot of my CX friends, and we spent a lot of time talking about job titles and people saying, well, what does CX mean anyway? And what does customer care mean? And is customer care better than customer service? And well, what about customer support? And now even customer success, right? So I think the words are all interchangeable. What's common amongst all of them is the word customer, right? So there's still this end-to-end journey piece. And so I still think customer experience should be the umbrella term, the 360, to your point. And any one of these other roles that I've spoken about can all sit in there. I think, why do people get confused? I guess because there isn't like a homogenous CX community out there that is claiming the space and defining it and talking about it and saying, right, we are Team CX. This is what CX means, and here you go. By the way, there's a lot of people that are trying to do that, but I still think in the end it's still a little bit fuzzy, but it's fuzzy around a common thing, and that's the customer. And typically you hear it in this combination, the customer at the heart of the business. And so some departments, some businesses, depending on how mature they are and what stage they're at, and then also some leaders, depending again their level of experience, they'll understand what customer at the heart of the business means. And some of them will do that in a very strategic way, and others will be more day-to-day operational or tactical with it. So I think it's that wonderful mix of the age and size of the business as well as the age and size of the workforce coming together, the segment they're in. Things like retail and luxury, I've spent a lot of time defining and figuring out CX and educating the workforce about it, versus, I guess, some of the lower margin, high volume, or, utilities industries that are all about bashing through contacts quickly and perhaps a little less time on CX. And so I've given you a very extended ranging answer, but it's a combination of those things.
Yeah, no, I think this is great, Sham. And look, you're right. I think you touched on not having a big CX community, and I agree. I feel like I don't see as much people speaking about it as you do see, product design or UX or product, tech. So yeah, I think that's a big factor. And then also, as you also mentioned there, just around being, that strategic approach versus non-strategic approach as well. I really want to touch on that because I personally believe, or my personal view is now that, as you said, a lot of the luxury brands have already had to do that, right? Because they have that brick and mortar that they had before. But I feel like now that companies are trying to be more strategic, they're really putting customer experience at the heart of things because they've got the data or they've got more access to understanding the segments and different customers that they have. I think they're realizing now that, you can't just make small increments, like you said earlier, right, Sham? Like little increments, you now have to really think, end to end to really kind of drive value, right?
100%. And those brands that I guess who've already figured out that there's an end-to-end customer journey and they name that and then they talk about that and every other department understands the role it plays, then that overarching sort of philosophy, the PMO, or whether it's the CEO or the MD that comes along at the beginning of the year and says, right, our 3 key focuses for this year are A, B, and C. And every department gets the same message, but they then translate it down to their department. That sort of enables those ones to be aware of the customer journey and the role they play within it. But there are others, that are doing great things. They're a bit more scrappy, and so maybe they have less time to sort of stop for a minute, define the customer journey. Actually, they just incrementally, in true startup fashion, they're just iterating as they go along to find product market fit. But even in those startup worlds, the person that is the founder who comes along and gets that first MVP up and running, even they know that the exchange happens with a customer. They know that I need to sell this to a customer who needs to give me something in return. And so just by its very nature, everybody understands that the customer is at the heart. It's then just whether how much of that comes through day to day, through strategy sessions, information sessions, training, all those other wonderful things. And some brands do it really well and others not so well.
Why do you think that is? Like, what do you think sets like some companies apart in terms of like the ones that do it really well and then the ones that are completely on the other end of the scale?
Yeah, it's interesting. I sort of tried to think about this a little bit in an equation, but I couldn't quite get there. I think it's a combination of talent. So the type of talent that you can access, that you can hire, that you could bring together, their skill, their knowledge, and how they can do things, versus the actual product or service that's on offer. So some products and services, regardless of the talent, they just will not achieve that product market fit. And maybe the talent that's there isn't able to increment, implement, innovate, tweak to product market fit. And those sometimes, we've all seen it. There's a handful of businesses that just almost by accident hit product market fit. And then through that traction, everybody wants to be involved. And so then the talent comes rushing in because they can see there's a rocket ship, they want to get involved in it. And so I think, if I had to try and pin it on a couple of things, I would say it's that combination of product market fit and talent. And if those two things come together in the right way, then I think you'd have a better outcome. But you're asking for two quite big things to come together in the right way. And so unless that's a bit deliberate, there's going to be more opportunities where it kind of doesn't work. And that's without even talking to you about socio-economic, political, and all these other external factors that will impact whether product market fit happens, whether you get the right talent, whether you're in the right market, and so on and so forth.
How can companies attract the best talent in terms of like customer service, customer experience? Like, especially like, say I use the example that you used, right? So you've got the founder's trying to got that first kind of MVP, they're trying to find product market fit. They fully understand that the customer is pivotal to doing that. How do they go about attracting in that initial instance the right candidates or the right people to bring into the company to kind of achieve their objective as soon as possible?
So I think my thoughts on it, and I guess there's two different routes to it, but I think if we're talking about founder-led startup, one or two people, my views are that the founder needs to personally hire each and every individual that joins that ship. I do think they should make quicker decisions. So, shorter recruitment cycles, which would include hiring and firing, unfortunately. But in the end, it's probably the faster and the right thing to do to hire and fire fast, so that they can make sure that each person along the way is aligned to their vision. And if they're able to sell their vision and the other person buys it, then you're at least aligned on one point, and then the rest is on letting them come in and I would say getting out of their way. That's probably where people do their best work, when you identify something in them and then you bring them in and then you move out of the way, like clear the road, help them be successful. And then I think as you get to a certain size, especially if you want to then scale and looking at 2x, 5x, 10x, whatever you want to do with your growth, I then think this is where partnerships comes in. I think, finding the right recruitment partners who do this day in and day out. So if we just take a very quick basic example of, the luxury players, they're very good at doing luxury. If you take like the subscription players, there's some that have nailed that sort of subscription cycle. I think to a certain point, a founder can recruit their own people, but then it just makes sense that if you go find the best recruiters and then bring them in, partner up with them, that they're probably going to do better than you at finding you that next person. I almost sort of say to somebody, where do you want to play? And if you're a founder, you probably want to play in that build it, sell it place. I'm going to help build this product. I'm going to help sell this product. They're the two big buckets in any startup. So my advice would be, when you get to a certain point, outsource that recruitment, partner up, and let them help you, because that recruiter day in, day out is recruiting. So they know what they don't know and all those other bits. And so there's a transition point. At some point, you need to switch over. And I don't think it's the same for everyone.
Yeah, really interesting, Sham, on that one. And I think you spoke about recruitment and customer service, right? And look, Sham, I know, where do you think the future's going with this? Because when I say future, I know we're going to talk about AI, right? Obviously, because everyone talks about AI now. But I feel like customer service, or and customer support was probably one of the first adopters of AI, right? Really, like we started to see bots coming in quite early, right, in that space. But some companies still haven't fully adopted it, right? What are your thoughts on this? And do you think we will go full AI in the future as it matures and gets better, or how do you feel like that's going to go?
Yeah, I think the amount of money that's behind AI, and especially all the big players that are getting behind it in that SaaS B2B space, all the big players like your Zendesks, your Salesforces, your Dixers of this world, who are long established in that customer care realm, they've seen the opportunity inside AI, the investment and money that is behind AI. Also, whatever happens, it's going to find ways to become part of people's lives. And I think my sort of biggest realization moment was the first time I created a Chat GPT account and asked it a couple of questions. And when those answers came back, I had that holy shit moment, and I was like, oh my God, this is different. This is not the same as asking Google a question. There's a whole nother thing going on here. And I think that sort of investment, but the marked improvement in the level of technology and the output of it, means that it's inevitably going to come in. I don't know if you both remember this. You're both quite young fellows, but do you remember the original Demolition Man movie, the Wesley Snipes version?
Yes, definitely old enough. Well, probably shouldn't have watched it at my age, but yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
There's a pivotal piece in the scene where he's been unfrozen from the past and he wakes up in the future, right? And he goes to a terminal in the middle of the street and he asks it some questions, and he's able to download skills from this, I'm going to call it a PC. He downloads like fighting skills, he downloads knowledge, and it's instant. It downloads to him. and he's able to suddenly now fight and suddenly know things about doing different things. And so that capability of being able to take knowledge like a module and just sort of download it, consume it, have it, I think that augmentation is probably the right word I'm looking for. I think the future is augmented. I think we will be better, faster, more knowledge, quicker. Like, all of that stuff is going to be available. So I think it's inevitable that it's coming. I think the differentiation and the bit where everybody talks about keeping it human, it's probably where that creativity piece comes in. And that's not to say that AI can't be creative, or at least randomly creative, but I would say it's probably not where you want it to be. What I mean by that is, I recently saw like I don't know if it's a meme, but I saw a post on LinkedIn. And in this post, the poster, she says, I don't want AI to do my writing and my creative art for me. I want it to do my laundry and my dishes, so I could do more creative writing and more art. And so, we're solving the easy problems right now, I think, with AI. As we start solving some of the more complex ones, people will get back more time. And we all know this. Doesn't matter how poor or rich you are, nobody can buy time. And so I think if there's ways to give yourself time back, then from a humanity perspective, and I hate to use the word humanity on a podcast like it's some big thing, but I think from a humanity perspective, we could get time back. Then that's the exact right condition for AI to flourish. That was one long-winded answer. I'm so sorry.
It's about to get longer. So you mentioned like it's currently solving the easy problems, and it's yet to solve the complex problems. In your world, like in customer experience, customer service, what are the easy problems that AI can solve for? And what are the complex ones that you're still figuring out, but we're in different need of fixing?
Yeah, I really do think that, Wizmo's, which I introduced you to earlier, Where Is My Order? Wizmo's good friend and cousin is called Wizmer. Where is my refund or replacement or return? So that's the act of a product going out or coming back into a business, and the customer looking for that reassurance. And so I think what typically breaks down that relationship is time, the speed to getting that information into the customer's hands. We've all used ChatGPT. It almost works too fast, right? You almost want to build in like a delayed 10 seconds to make it look like it's thinking, so that it sort of builds your confidence in the answer that you're getting. Side note. But I think if we can use AI to capture that Wizmo information, it knows who you are, it knows you've got an order, it knows which carrier, it knows if it's on the road, it knows if it's likely to arrive, and just nudges you and says, hey, Sham, your user's on the way. Don't worry, you don't need to contact anybody. Like, even if it's just that little nudge, or even, I don't know, I wake up in the morning and I'm taking my medication and my Echo says good morning to me and says, hey, your users are on the way today, don't forget. That's just like a reminder. I don't even need to contact anybody. I think you could do that right now. I think the technology and the integrations exist to achieve that now in 2024. So then it just begs the question around appetite, somebody actually going and doing it. So I think these are very repetitive, easy use cases that we could solve right now.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. I mean, I think the question I have as well off the back of this is, do you think AI can ever replace human beings, right? Like this, where is my order? Where is my refund? These are quite easy, right? But we've all been there where we want to kind of speak to someone because maybe the problem's a little bit more challenging, right? And then usually the AI hands off to, oh, let me get you an actual customer service agent, or let me actually get you someone to speak to, right? Do you think we'll ever get to a point where they can deal with frustration or deal with like every single query or problem and resolve it, and also have the sense to say, hey, this customer's actually lying here, or I'm not going to give this customer a refund because they didn't actually return it on time? Or, how do they, when will we see that kind of deducing of knowing what the right thing to do is?
I think that will happen, right? So today we can track sentiment and we can use AI and language models to figure out what the sentiment is, how customers are feeling about something, That exists already right now. So I don't think we're too far away from some level of reasoning that says, okay, you already know the sentiment. So if we're in a real-time conversation now, we can pick up the sentiment of this call. So I can also, because I'm connected by the very nature, I can see customers' history, I can see their spend, I can see what products they buy, I can see how often they buy. I also happen to know that this product they're asking for a refund on, I've had 57 other refund requests for the exact same product from 57 other customers today. And so I now, as the AI, have all this information available to me. I should be able to make a better decision. And I think there is that element of not worrying too much about replacing humans and maybe even welcoming the replacement of some tasks, some jobs that we do, so that we could get more time to ourselves and do other things with it. So, yeah, some of that sort of deducing of sentiment, it's there today. So I don't think it's too far away. But I think what you're probably going to see is a slow transition of brands starting to try and measure sentiment in real time and probably almost like a co-pilot, give the agent some tips and say, hey, I can detect that this customer's unhappy, or a refund in this example probably would satisfy this customer. And then as we get the data to reinforce actually that was the right hint, the right tip, and actually did resolve the query, the more of those, what do you call them, reassurances that we get with the data, we'll start automating more of those things. But I'd much rather, I think if it was me in my call center, have my agents, helping to, let's take the fashion example, dress customers for a party. Or let's take a holiday planning example, build an itinerary and help them figure out, what they want to do when they get to Paris or wherever it is they're going. So I think let's use AI to get rid of some of that repetitive, boring stuff, I'm going to call it in inverted commas, and then enable some of this more interesting stuff to happen with agents. And actually, this interesting stuff that I'm talking about also drives P&L, it drives revenue for the business. So if anything, there's a great incentive to try and accelerate some of this stuff.
Do you think that arguably AI could actually do some of these things better, freeing up the time for the agents to be able to, create an itinerary or help the customers get dressed and pick the right outfits and this kind of stuff? Do you think AI potentially could do that better than the agents can, or do you still think that, I guess the human nature of things could, I guess, will win in the end?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's probably like a Hollywood movie somewhere that's going to come out of this. But I do think there is an element of being able to crunch large numbers of scenarios in a quick way to produce a level of consistency that maybe more times out of not would satisfy 80% of people. There's still always going to be that 20% that is looking for something a little bit more bespoke, something a little bit more creative, or curated even. So let's say that AI and through lots of training through a language model is able to handle 8% of all queries, but it turns out that in the world, Jay is the guy to go to for your sneakers. Then unless we turn you into like an AI or, the JLLM, chances are that I'm going to be willing to pay for your time to get your view and your opinion. It's that bespoke nature, that personalization, which, all three of us know is hot commodity, it's high margin stuff. There's brands that, dominating the top 10 revenue numbers in the world that play in this luxury space. And so I think there's still market for that curated human view.
I would love to be turned into that. That'll save me so much time at work. It's like any questions, we're just getting diverted to the...
Love it.
So Sham, I mean, I know we've spoken a lot about AI, we've spoken about, your customer experience journey and so on. I think it'd be interesting. I know you touched on it briefly earlier as well, but you did go through a bit of a difficult period, right, in your career, which you're not the only one, right? I know that this was a big topic during COVID. It still is a big issue especially in the US market, right, where people that major redundancies happening. How did you navigate that space? And can you tell us a bit more about how you bounced back from that?
Yeah, redundancies. So I think I'll start off by saying in the last 22 years, I've had about 5 redundancies. And I think early on, I just sort of shrugged my shoulders and moved on with it. And then more recently, in the last number of years, I was in a different headspace, right? As I said to you guys, I'm married, I've got a kid, COVID has happened, the economy's happened, everything is a little bit more difficult to deal with nowadays. And when I sort of got that redundancy, I almost should have seen it coming, right? Hindsight's a beautiful thing, but when you see what's going on in the economy, when you have the commercial lens that I had access to and I understood the sales plan and where we were versus that plan, I almost should have seen it coming. What I think, though, is what it did is it shocked me into action. And without, going into cliche mode, I have a family to provide for. That's my role in my household. That's where I excel. And so as soon as I hit that redundancy road, I immediately thought, well, I can't stay here. I need to do something about it. And so, I don't know, I was almost a little bit inspired by a book. I don't know if you guys know, it's called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Love that book. And what I sort of took away from it was this idea of you start with your idea and you test it. And then based on the answer you get back, you tweak it, then go test it, then tweak it, then go test it. And in my head, I thought, well, the lean startup for me is Sham needs to get a job. And so I was made redundant in October, and I decided by Christmas I was going to get a job. And then, I don't know, maybe my PR marketing brain kicked in a little bit, and I just thought, that doesn't sound so good. I'm going to get a job in the next 100 days. And then through iteration, I ended up coming up with this idea that I would contact 100 people in 100 days to find myself a job. And so I took this whole LinkedIn content persona on, which was, how would I write a great post? And it almost sort of ties back into the Amazon working backwards principles. So I wrote out the result I wanted, which was I'm going to get a job by Christmas. And then the how was, I'm going to speak to 100 people in 100 days. And then with that, I then built a plan. And so all my years of working in call centers, being involved in operations, tactical projects, project plans, I literally built a calendar plan of 100 people that I wanted to speak to. And the way I started was, who are the first sort of people that come to mind? And I sort of maxed out at about 50 that immediately came to mind in my head. And then that was without looking at LinkedIn. So my first thought was, if I'm going to ring 50 people now, who are they? And I wrote them down. And then I started texting, WhatsApping, and LinkedIning them depending on what I had. And I said, hey, I've just been made redundant. I'd love to catch up. It was as basic as that. And most people, just based on my network and, the years that I'd known them, they gave me that call. They were like, yeah, let's talk to you. So we jumped on a call and I sort of had a bit of a chit chat, found out how they were, told them how I was, told them what I was up to. And then there's a question I asked every single one of those people. I said to them, who do you know that I don't, that you think I should chat to? And every single one of them was willing to introduce me to at least one other person. And then because they had introduced me, I then got that follow-up meeting with that new person. So over the next 100 days, I got to 100 people. I actually went past that. I went past 100 people and I did it before the 100 days. But really quickly, if we're doing maths here, out of these 100, I only needed 4 or 5 to offer me something, and then for me to accept one offer. So I gave myself a 1% margin of, out of 100 people, I could get one job. And I ended up winning like 3, 4, 5 contracts. I ended up getting multiple job offers. And I sort of dived into a job, and it's difficult when I sort of run it off like that. I make it sound like this was easy. Like it really wasn't. And I hope that given how long you've known me, and you know that my humble approach isn't to sit here and be like, yeah, it's easy, I found it. That's not what this is about. It was about having a plan and executing it. But yeah, that's kind of how I dealt with redundancy when it came and slapped me in the face in October last year.
Yeah, and look, Sham, this is inspirational, right? Because I actually did read an article about something similar to this, right? And the fact that you went with the 100 days, what I read actually was a little bit different. It's like it was percentages, right? So to get a role, I think they said, like you mentioned, right, you need 3 to 5% of the applications that you do will give you a interview, right, or a final stage. So, and I think it was something like, only 10% of them will get back in touch with you, something like that, right? You actually only get 10% of people actually giving you an interview in the first place, right? So to get those margins, you almost need like 100%, which is like 100, 100 like applications, right? So, but like you said, it's not easy, right? It's 100 days, right, of applying into different roles. So it's a lot of resilience, it's a lot of rejections, but a lot of hard work, right?
Yeah, rejection, resilience. Let's add in some tears and sleepless nights too. Let's talk about the stuff that nobody wants to talk about online. The failures, right? So I would get up in the morning, and if that day I didn't have a meeting, I didn't have one in the diary, then I was like, well, what do I do today? I don't have a job. And so what I was able to do was just put my trainers on and run. So I picked up running. And for me, in terms of like mental well-being, wellness, health, it gave me a space outside of my home office, outside of my family too, to be by myself. Just put my headphones in, pop on an audiobook, and just go for a run. And that sort of moment by myself allowed me to come back, refresh, recharge with a clearer view and a mind on things. There were times where I'd be running and an idea would pop into my head. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm going to forget that by the time I get back. I'm too far away from home. So I would take my phone out, add a little note on it, put it back in my pocket. And so those moments of not being at my home office and applying for jobs or having a meeting with somebody, they were equally valuable. So I'd be careful in saying to anybody that all of your waking moments should be spent on job applications and interviews and all that kind of stuff. Because you kind of still have to turn up. When you get that 10%, that 3%, that 5%, you need to be ready to go. And you're not going to be ready to go if you're sort of tired and frustrated and feeling let down because you've had like 5 interviews and they ghosted you or they didn't come back to you. So I think making sure you take care of your health means that you'll turn up better. And so I made sure whatever happened, I went for a run. Rain, snow, sunshine, whatever. I put those trainers on and I went for a run.
I think that is so key, like, especially on the mental health side, like making sure that you're kind of keeping that positive energy kind of flowing through your body, so that you can kind of remain focused on more things to kind of get that job. And like, there's also like a lot of noise on the outside around this in particular kind of scenario, like job searching. You need to kind of tailor every single CV to the application or to the company, or even like as far as tailor it to the hiring manager. Did you like take on board any of these kind of approaches, or was your attitude more so like cast your net far and wide and you can see how many fish you can catch? What was the approach?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think what I had noticed over the years, and this goes all the way back to, the early jobs that I had in my career, there was always many applicants going after one role. And so early on, it was by luck almost that you managed to get yourself an interview. And even now in today's world with everybody being online, even LinkedIn tells you how many people have applied for a job. And if you see a job after it's been posted, like literally 1 hour after it's been posted, it's had 200 applications. So my thoughts on it at that time was, well, I'm unlikely to stand out in this 200. And so for me, it was the power of relationships. And so in my head, I was like, I need to differentiate myself and get myself onto somebody's table for them to see my CV. And so whilst I did absolutely apply through LinkedIn for things, I focused on getting in front of people and talking to them and just telling them that I was available. And that's how I got a couple of projects first. And then those projects turned into contracts. And then those fixed term contracts turned into permanent long term contracts. And so for me, it was how do I increase the chances of getting my CV on the table? And I chose to do that through conversation.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, Sham, as well, because a lot of people I speak to, they're not sure whether the networking works or not. I know some people feel, or some managers or hiring managers kind of look at it as a negative, or reaching out to people on my team, they don't like that kind of aspect. So I know that a lot of people have struggled to know, is it the right thing to do, is it not the right thing to do? It sounds like you had a bit of success in that, Sham, and would you recommend for people to definitely try that networking side of things?
100%. The sort of think about thousands of years to the marketplace where tradespeople would barter with each other and exchange items for different things. I don't see why that has to change now in 2024. It's still about that connect. It's about that relationship. It's about that exchange. The exchange of value is very different today to what it would have been 2,000 years ago in a market somewhere in the desert. But I still think the value of a network speaks volumes. So I'm just scanning my CV in my mind, and I would say over the last 22 years, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4 roles that I secured through my network. And at least of those 4, 3 of them were not open advertised opportunities at the time. So that just tells you that there is a hidden jobs market out there. And I think the way you uncover it is through networking. I think it's through those connections that I go to a lot of events, for example, and I talk always about CX, to the point where you and I were together last year in Dubai. So I'll even fly to places to do things. I enjoy it. I geek out on that kind of stuff. But it also means that people see me and know me. And so sometimes I'll get a phone call from somebody that will be like, I've got this problem, I need it fixing, and I thought of you. Like, so many people say that to me, that I thought of you. And they only thought of me because they knew me through my network or through an event, or they saw some of my work out there. So, look, I'm not saying don't apply for stuff and follow the online method. Sometimes there are brands that rigidly stick to that, and I think that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think putting yourself out there and building your network, not just to secure a job, but just to get ahead in life or to meet a life partner or whatever else. Right? Without networking, I never would have met my wife. So, and then my son wouldn't be here. So, I think the whole world is about relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And look, Sham, you also touched on a really good part there around with the networking. You didn't just focus on, hey, have you got a job for me? It was more contracting work as well, right? And that's something I haven't always seen often, but actually now that you say it, it's actually a really good idea, right? It's like, yeah, I know you might not have budget to hire me full time, but how about like project or anything you need support on that you could do an extra pair of hands? Because there's the more likelihood of that, right? And then that kind of spurred into your consultancy work, right?
Yeah, exactly that. So I think they've named it now. This has been going for a long time, but the word of fractional is now sort of like quite in, right? So fractional consulting, fractional projects. Yeah, so when I was talking to people, one, I knew them, right? So it was a catch up first, like, how are you? What's going on? And vice versa. And then it would naturally flow into is there anything that I could help you with? And or have you been approached about any opportunities that are not right for you that I might be able to pick up for you? And people wanted to provide that reciprocal value, right? So some people being approached for project work didn't have the bandwidth to do it, knew the quality that I could provide, and said, well, actually, I'll introduce you, because it would also reflect on them, and they are saying no to that person by not doing it for them, but then offering me up as a plan B. And then I come in, do a good job, and then now everyone's happy. Everyone wins in that scenario. So yeah, I sort of went in there. Fractional stuff was just easy. There were things that I did for people 1 or 2 hours in a day, and then some examples would have been a week's worth. And then actually, after I'd even built like a whole strategy for somebody, spent 5 days on it, put a whole pack together, presented it, and right at the end, the conversation was, "This is really good. This is like some of the best strategic work I've seen. Can you come and deliver it, please?" I wasn't even expecting that. In my mind, I was like, I'm done. I've finished this piece of work. I'm going to send a bill. I'm going to get paid. I'm going to move into the next project. Turns out that turned into a fixed term contract where I ended up getting a 3-month deal out of it because actually they wanted it delivered, not just strategized. And so once I'd sort of done that, and I was sort of now at this point, I'd doubled down and gone hard on LinkedIn by just sort of talking about everything I was up to, just constantly, non-stop, which I have to say, when I was at Selfridges for 7 years, I had slowed down because I was in this sort of day-to-day routine. I wasn't always finding time to get out and get onto LinkedIn and build my network. But as soon as I hit October last year, I went in. I just started writing stuff. Even if I was having inspiration on a weekend, I would write it and then schedule it to go live during the week. So I was forward planning my content. And so every week on a Tuesday, there'll be a post from me. It just comes out. And this sort of consistency then drives the algo, as you guys know. And then that drives more eyeballs, and I meet more people, and I go to more events. And next thing you know, I've created this sort of flywheel where I'm now sort of out there everywhere. So I don't have to actually say to somebody, "Can I have a job, please?" To the point that the current role that I'm in, I got a phone call the day after Matches Fashion went into administration from Sharad, the founder of Sentisum. And he was like, "Hey, you spent a lot of time in retail and customer care. Why don't you come and learn about AI?" And how could I say no to that? So that's how I ended up in this job. I got called to come and do this job.
Amazing journey, right? And some really key takeaways from that, right? And yeah, the power of networking, the power of like being active, treating LinkedIn as a social media platform, does pay off. It does work. So yeah, no, this is great. And yeah, your current role, Sham, director of partnerships. When I was kind of looking at your profile on LinkedIn, I always look at the slogan, right? There's partnerships plus customer experience plus AI equals like fire, right? So yeah, can you tell us a bit more about like what you're currently doing and what does that mean, that kind of recipe for success there?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't know. I've sort of only just discovered fire emojis, so I like using them. I don't know if they're in and if the kids think it's cringe, but it's all good. I quite enjoy a good fire emoji. I think after the most recent redundancy, I also sat down and had a word with myself. Jay was asking me earlier, how did you know that you needed to be more strategic? I don't know how I knew, but I knew last year that I wanted to understand this AI stuff. In my head, I was like, what's this AI thing that's turned up? This whole chat GPT thing. Like, how do I get in on that? How do I pivot or transition into AI? So that was in the back of my mind. So then when I sort of ended up meeting Sharad and Sentisum, there was a value exchange there. I was the CX guy coming to an AI company and noting that Sentisum sells into CX people. The value exchange was that I would come over from the CX side. In return, I'd get to learn about AI and pivot. So that's kind of how I ended up. That LinkedIn slogan takes my love of CX, my curiosity of AI, together with my day role as partnerships, and therefore equals fire emojis. And so it's me leaning in. It's me leaning in all the way to learn as much as I possibly can about AI. And then actually not just learning, but taking that to improve CX. So my first love, my true love, CX. When I was at one brand at a time, I was only impacting the CX of that one brand. And now through the power of Sentisum, I'm able to do that on multiplier with multiple brands and many CX leaders. And so if anything, it's almost supercharged. So that's what that slogan is. It's a little refresh.
Nice. Yeah. And so in terms of the partnerships, are you looking at more? I mean, I'm trying to understand this a bit more because again, we spoke about your kind of journey, right? And this journey now into partnerships.
So partnerships within the SaaS or the B2B industry. There's a handful of different analogies out there. None of them are mine. But the way I sort of look at it is within SaaS and B2B, so software within B2B, there's usually two directions of travel. There's inbound, where the customer miraculously finds you, whether that's through marketing or some other sort of strategy. And then there's outbound, and that's where the B2B the SaaS business will reach out to potential customers and try and get their attention. And so you've got that whole business development sales cycle side of it. You've got the marketing side of it, and then you've got the partnership side of it. And so the way that partnership works in B2B and SaaS is around building the ecosystem that enables everybody to win. And when I say everybody there, it's us as a B2B supplier, others who are in the CX industry but not our competitors, and I'll explain what that means in a moment, but then also that end CX customer. So I believe with my heart that what we do here at Sentisum, if implemented correctly, will help produce better customer experiences. In order to do that, I need to get into a brand and have that solution there up and running and live. So I could either try and identify that brand and then cold call them, send them emails, turn up to their front door with a box of chocolates or whatever it takes to get the meeting, right? I could stand in Liverpool Street Station with a placard saying, please give me a meeting. I don't know if that stuff works anymore, but that's one approach. The partnerships approach is I know that that brand works with these two other B2B suppliers who are not competitors, but they're in the same industry as me. So I'm going to go build a relationship over there and I'm going to go and add value to what they're doing so that the end customer wins. And so the idea of partnerships is building a mutually beneficial ecosystem. You know, like when you look at partnerships on LinkedIn, sometimes it's all about fancy dinners and, you know, LinkedIn posting content. But actually, underneath all of that, it comes back to what we've been talking about throughout this whole podcast, which is relationships. What we're doing is we're building relationships. And then through those relationships come the opportunities. And then that's when me and our sales team are ready to then come along and help sort of close those deals.
Do you find that your kind of experience, like not just in customer service and customer experience, but also the redundancies that happen during your career and your proactiveness and how you come through some of those trials, do you think that's helped you in your current role to kind of really kind of break through and kind of reach out to people, build those connections and find those partnerships? Do you feel like that's, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, do you feel like without those experiences or things happening to you, would you still be as effective?
It's a really good question. I'm going to ask you a question first and then answer yours. Are you familiar with the Karate Kid movie?
Yes.
I don't
More
know.
so than Demolition Man.
Yeah, good. So the original Karate Kid movie with Daniel San and Mr. Miyagi, there's a concept in there of wax on and wax off. And so very quickly, for those that are not familiar with it, Daniel San spends many, many, many hours applying wax to a car and then taking it back off the car. And the idea there is that he learns muscle memory so that when it comes time for him to fight in the tournament, when the opposition goes to strike him, that muscle memory that he developed by hours and hours of practice of wax on and wax off, he was able to block, defend, and then win the goal actually in the end. So all those years of redundancies, building relationships, finding one job after another, pivoting, figuring out how to get into the boardroom, win investment, all of those for me were my wax on and wax on moments. So that when I got to 2024 and hit yet another redundancy, and then Sentisum came along and said, hey, we'd like to experiment with partnerships. Are you up for it? And I said, I got a lot of wax on, wax off experience. If you can give me a little bit of runway, I think I could figure this out. And so here we are now, 7 months later. I'm in the middle of building this ecosystem up, identifying the right partners, talking to many, many, many CX people, which ultimately is my people, right? That's who I was for the last 22 years. So I get to hang out with people like me. I get to help solve their problems, which is great because they're like, oh, I'm stuck with this. And how did you do this here and there? And I can just give it to them and move on. And sometimes that will turn into a demo and sometimes it won't. But my goal isn't necessarily to get to the demo. My goal is to still be that guy that people think of when they have a CX issue. They're like, oh, I got a problem. Who should I call? And call Sham. So yeah, I think everything before has combined to make me effective now. That was a long way of answering your question.
No, I think that's great. Like, because I think the reason why I wanted to like backtrack a little bit, just because like you said, like several powerful things, also explaining your kind of experience and navigating the job market, etc. think that a lot of people can grasp what value is. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, you ended up in a dream situation where people, I think anyone would love to just get that phone call or that message to say like, hey, like, we want you. And you've done that through not just networking, but also through like building your personal brand. And I suppose there's probably many people out there that want to start their personal brand journey and probably don't know where to start or how to start, or probably feel silly, posting in front of their peers or ex-colleagues or current colleagues, Have you, what would be your advice to just get someone started and, get them over that first personal hurdle, if you use it yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I still feel silly now when I post stuff. If you look at my last video I posted, I tried to do some acting in it, which is terrible, by the way, but it's almost, but not quite, 0 Fs. Like, I'm at that stage in my life where it doesn't really matter to me what anybody thinks. I don't have the energy to care. Like, I definitely care what my mum thinks. I definitely care what my wife and my son think. But I really don't care about Joe blogs on the internet. So, in that regard, I just say what's on my mind. So, like, let's say that I'm battle hardened and, I've been through it a little bit to get to this point. If I go back to the 20-year-old me, I don't know if I would have been exactly the same, but I would say find your voice. And the only way you're going to find your voice is by starting to write. And so even if you're writing a journal where only you see it and you're not even posting it, then just do that. Just write to yourself. And then at some point, push yourself out a little bit and post that one thing and choose your platform, whether if you want to go the video route, I'm hearing that TikTok is a place to be at the minute in terms of business. I'm not there yet. I'm still on LinkedIn. That seems to be my platform of choice. But I would say just get started, start writing. Very quickly, you will find yourself, you will find your voice. And I think more importantly, you're going to find your people. And once your people start reacting to you and start giving you feedback, over time, you'll just get better and better and better at it. And so get started, write in private, post the first one, go back, post the next one. Maybe even find yourself a buddy. If you are on these platforms and you're seeing somebody else that you admire who posts often and you think, oh, I love what they do, I wish I could do that. Maybe reach out to them on the side and just say, hey, I was thinking of getting started. Could I get some advice? People love to share and mentor when it comes from a genuine place. And so, yeah, the only way you're going to get feedback is by actually getting started. And so find your voice. One of the things that I do often, if I've got a new problem to solve, I normally look for somebody that I can speak to about it and spar with them. So I'll say to them, look, here's what I think I know. Tell me what I don't know. And then I will just throw out a bunch of assumptions. And then they'll respond back and say, well, why would you do that? That's crazy. Or they'd come back and say, well, that's interesting. Let's dig deep on that angle. And by the end of the conversation, 30 minutes later, I'm now 10 times more sort of up to speed, or maybe even 10 times more stupid, I don't know. But I'm further along. And so by this point, I've kind of found somewhere. So can you find a sparring partner who can help you have that sort of back and forth that will give you a bit of confidence, develop your way of thinking, enable you? And let's say you've done all those things, but you're still a little bit unsure, then go for the more practical stuff. So for example, if you want to build a social presence, there's about 53 million YouTube videos on how to do it. So maybe think, if I want to do a video presence, or if I want to start writing LinkedIn posts, watch a couple of videos on, I guess, how to do it, so that you at least have a little bit of knowledge, and then just find your voice. I hope that some of those were like practical steps on getting started.
No, I think that's really, really solid advice and really tangible takeaways that will kind of help even the most, well, even the shyest person to branch out, start doing things. You mentioned something else which really resonated, which was you kind of read Eric Rice's book Lean Startup, and that kind of really kind of helped you, kind of get into that mindset of experimentation. And it just reminded me of when I started applying for jobs at the start of the year kind of thing. I was like taking a similar approach where I was like, I treated the whole process like a product, like a series of micro kind of experimentations. I'd send something out, see what works, understood the feedback, then make iterations. And with each iteration, the responses got better and better and better, and the outcomes got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I think that's definitely something that someone should take away from this conversation is, you can just keep improving, right? Just treat everything as an experiment in order to kind of reach your main objective. Don't just take one solution. It's going to get you to where you need to be. You need to continually kind of improve. But yeah, definitely solid advice there.
Yeah, it's really good to hear it played back to me in the way that you just played it back. Yeah, exactly. Look, there's always still that one person out there who takes one go at it, lands that job immediately, posts an Insta story about it, and we all sit there thinking, well, how did you do that? But actually, it's more likely that there's more people out there like you and IJ who have taken that sort of iterative approach and just kept tweaking and sort of found our way.
Yeah, and just to add to that, what both you're saying there, the trial and error, right? I love the testing something out first, right, with a small group of people, like you said, sparring. But even Sham, if not sparring with just one person, maybe like a group of people as well. That's something I've seen some people have success in before. It's like trying a post or trying anything that you're trying to do with a small subgroup of people first, see how that goes, get multiple, like a focus group, right? But yeah, if you've got enough people to kind of reach out to, that can also be a great way.
Yeah, I like that actually. I've got a couple of small cozy, I call them cozy WhatsApp groups. There's about 10, 12 people, ever so slightly segmented across, like running, CX, couple of other things. And in there, that I've even got an MMA one because I love that. So there's this whole bit around you going to each one. Sometimes you say the wrong thing in the wrong group, you figure it out too late. You're like, wrong group, delete message, go to the other one. But it enables you, like you said, to just sort of find your people, test ideas, get a bit of feedback. Sometimes you get slated too, which is always fun. But I think that's what you rely on your friends for, right? To give you some of that honest feedback sometimes. And then that's kind of how you develop. But as I say, again, I'll repeat it. I really only care what my mum thinks. Outside of that, the rest of it doesn't matter to me.
Mum knows best, right?
100%, 100%. So I think, in the grand scheme, as long as I'm not doing anything so wrong that it would upset somebody, if I do an experiment and it fails, I'll just do another one. I'll do the next one and the next one. And the way that the world works, it goes forwards, right? And so the day where the experiment happened and failed, that's now yesterday. And before you know it, it's last week. And you blink and it was 6 months ago. Like nobody remembers it. You're now in the future and you're doing the next experiment.
Sham, it's been a really interesting and insightful discussion today. We've gone through all aspects, right? Customer service, customer experience, partnerships, failure, and bouncing back. It's been epic, right? It's been amazing. And where can people find you, Sham?
Firstly, thank you, Jay, Warren, for inviting me on. I've enjoyed it. I love talking to you guys. We spent so much time talking offline as well. And even before we hit that big old record button, I could talk to you guys for hours. And so thank you. I really appreciate you bringing me on and letting me sort of speak and also teaching me so many new things. People can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Sham and look out for the fire emojis. I'll be there. And that's the best place, I guess, to engage with me is on LinkedIn.
And soon TikTok, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I'm thinking about it. My son wants me to do it, and I'm like, well, only if you do it with me. He's 12, so I might do this weird hybrid 12-year-old giving business advice with me in the background, and I will figure it out.
Looking forward to that. Thank you, Sham.
Cheers, guys. Wish you well.
Thanks, Sham.